Hi everybody, welcome to Wildlife Cake and Cocktails, episode 17 here. We're talking RepX Brisbane Reptile Expo with Joe Ball and Scott Owen, and talking some blue tongue lizard stuff. In honour of our very special guests, of course, we have to have our cake and cocktails. So we're drinking lounge lizards. It's dark rum with about half a shot of amaretto as well, some lime juice, topped off with Coke, and it's got an orange wedge in there because we're fancy. And we're having a blue velvet cake, not red velvet. We've got blue velvet because we're talking blue tongue lizards. Blue tongue lizards. So we got our lounge lizards and our
blue velvet cake.
Oh yeah. Man, the icing on that is pretty much just like a really sugary cheesecake. And you can still pour. It just hasn't set into consistency. It's fantastic. All right. Joining us today, we have the very talented Mr. Joe Ball from bluetonguelizard.com.au. You can also find him on Facebook at Blue Tongue Lizard.
Same, yeah, bluetonguelizard.com.au on Facebook, Instagram, and even YouTube.
Even YouTube as well.
Yeah,
of course, you're doing a lot of videos on there, quite instructional and...
Yeah, a bit of all sorts.
A little bit educational.
Trying to go for quality, not quantity.
Yeah. Very good, very good. He's got a Master's in Animal Science, and he's also one of the RepX Brisbane Reptile Expo Ambassadors, which we'll be talking about a little bit more later. Joe's an incredibly knowledgeable and innovative blue tongue lizard breeder here in Brisbane and a world leader in producing some phenomenal coloured morphs of blue tongue. Now these are not just your regular albinos and things that occasionally pop up fairly regularly when people start breeding things repeatedly, but there's some pretty, some really cool jet black hypermelanistics, and now producing even some like multiple gene crossovers like the lavas and the
so it's all about getting two colour morphs and combining them to see what the next outcome can be. So
right.
Yeah, it's all in the combination.
and
That's the buzzword at the moment.
And a lot of like variation there for breeders.
Yeah, of course, you get a lot of natural variation in there too.
Yeah.
So it basically opens up a can of worms when you get all these ingredients and put them together. You surprise yourself.
Yeah,
you
right.
Definitely surprise the community, and you most definitely surprise yourself with what can be achieved. So.
Well, there's some phenomenal, like really beautiful looking morphs that are coming out, and things that you just wouldn't expect to be, hidden, locked away there in the blue tongue genome with a little bit of
and when you think what the blue tongue was when I first got into reptiles, which was really an E-grade celebrity in the blue tongue world. This sort of, this animal that you keep in a cage that poops and stinks everywhere. And
basically, training wheels for reptiles.
Yeah, a very, very poor cousin to a snake.
Yeah.
And now, all of a sudden, the snake world is looking, especially in Australia anyway, is looking up at the blue tongues, and they've basically shown snakes a clean pair of heels when it comes to the morph combinations and potential.
Yeah, right.
So,
fantastic stuff. And look, you also keep you're keeping emerald tree monitors and some other cool things. I saw some photos with parentes and other monitor lizards.
Yeah, I also get into the monitors. Yeah, I like to keep all the big monitors, if you like. That's my Harley in the driveway.
Nice.
It's my parente.
Yeah, fantastic.
It's not needed, it's not necessary, but hey, I've got them.
I spent several weeks volunteering out doing some ecological stuff for AWC. And in my time off, I was looking for a parente. I spent 2 weeks out there looking for one. Couldn't find one. 3 days after we leave, they find a juvenile in one of their pitfalls.
Yeah.
Beautiful animals. Now, look, also on the couch, we're lucky enough to be talking to Mr. Scott Owen from RepX Brisbane Reptile Expo. He's here to tell us a bit more about the upcoming event, some of the incredible displays they have going down, and some of the ins and outs of running a wildlife expo of this magnitude. All happening on March 25th. 2018. So look, if you are interested out there in reptiles, native reptiles in particular, save the date. That'll be the inaugural RepX Brisbane Reptile Expo on the 25th of March at the Royal International Convention Centre in the Brisbane Showgrounds, boasting an amazing array of invertebrates, birds of prey, and much, much more for you all to come and experience. And you can check them out at repx.com.au. Guys, thank you so much for joining us at Wildlife Cake and Cocktails.
Cool, thanks.
Excellent. Scott, before we talk to Joe all about his blue tongue breeding and that kind of stuff, just I guess he's just a couple of short months away from what is a first of its kind, 1,700 meters squared, the biggest reptile expo in the state. Why do something so difficult? Why take on such a big challenge? What was the inspiration for the project, basically?
I own I'm part owner of Veritas Reptile.
All right.
Right.
Okay.
So I've done that for a long time, and I've been to shows probably since 2010. And I never really went to these shows with the idea that I want to do my own. I really just went for my own business. But it wasn't until I went to the Perth show to extend some business over there that I met John McGrath, who came to me and he says, "Oh, what do you think of the show?" I was like, "Oh, it's pretty good, but they need to fix this and that and whatever." He said, "Oh, have you ever thought of doing your own?" And I thought, yes, but I didn't know what to do. So he said he knew all these contacts.
Right.
And I have a very strong sort of production background.
So we have John to thank.
Yeah, he instigated it basically. But I've always wanted to, as years have gone on, I've always felt like I wanted to do something about it. And people would say that, "Oh, we should do this, we should do that," but then it doesn't happen, and they may not have the knowledge of how to do that, and that's fair. But really, the only way that you know it's going to work is if you actually do it. So I'm just going down that path to do that, basically.
Making it all happen, step by step. So what exactly is your role at RepX?
So my background, I've been, like, past, say, 10 years, I've done essentially what's called industrial design for signage. So it's a role where I have to design complicated signage for multinational brands in the Pacific region. So it's a lot of work with complicated things and planning. But 2 years ago, I also had a stroke where it made my mind essentially it was a rare stroke where it made my mind smarter. Right?
Wow.
So it made me better at planning.
So your logistic skills got even better.
Yeah, basically better than they were. So they said that whatever my mind was like before, it just essentially got like triply enhanced, super enhanced basically. So the psychologist I was talking to at the time, she said, we got to think of ways that kind of engage with how your mind is now. So it turns out that I'm a bit more of a boss brain and a lot more like solution-driven planning, that kind of thing.
Management and organisation.
And that's essentially someone who organises a show.
Right.
So I've pretty much been essentially born into this role.
Right.
But I've got all the experience to know how to produce it, kind of thing.
The capacity to coordinate, if you like.
That kind of thing.
Because I certainly find when I try and coordinate anything, once it gets more than 4 or 5 fold, it just gets too much.
That's what we have producers for.
Yeah.
If any of our audience have ever heard any of our shows, or if you guys have ever heard any of our shows where I don't have an audio producer helping me because they're away for some reason, it's a shambles. We need to have Summer Sound Solutions over there.
So officially my role as such is called the visual production manager.
Yeah.
But like John, he'll basically do the finance side and key kind of like contact side of things.
Right.
But anything that has to do with how it's delivered and why that's there and how we get that to work, that's all on me.
Wow.
And then one of the reasons why I'm here is kind of to do with the production side of that.
Did you, just a random thought, did you have this the stroke before or after you were thinking about running the expo?
Oh, before. Like 2 years ago, November 2015, I think.
Wow. So the expo came around that quickly? A couple of years and...
Oh, no. I've been going to the expo since 2010.
Right.
Just generally for my other business.
Right.
But I went to Perth, I think, July last year.
Yeah, okay.
Just to expand my Veritas Reptile brand. There was no idea of doing a show.
Last year is when things really kicked off.
Well, basically, John came to me in July, and I think we got the whole business side of things, the number and ABN and all that kind of thing, sorted out in April, September. So it's been essentially going since then. I think the website came up in October. So we've been really running for the past 5 months, and while it is our first show, I'm pretty sure we're doing a really good job of just even getting to there.
Well, look, everything that we've seen coming up about it looks fantastic. Like I said, there's so many amazing displays from the display areas to the monitor pits and the birds of prey. I'm very, very excited about seeing. Even getting close to a wedge-tailed eagle. For somebody who's never gotten to see them up that close, I definitely recommend people get down there. It's looking like it's going to be a good show.
Yeah, well, you only ever get to see, like, wedge-tails normally, like, 200 metres in the sky.
Yeah.
They're tiny, but you get to see, like, right up there and close. And
if you're lucky enough, you might find one next to the road hitting some carrion.
Yeah.
That's about it. Yeah.
But if the venue allows for it, because it might depend on whether there's someone in that space or not, if the plaza is open for that day, we'll be getting possibly, like, say, 3 to 4 flight shows done on the day as well.
Wow, flight shows inside the plaza.
Well, not in the plaza is the outside sort of foyer area.
Okay.
it's outside. It's not inside a building.
Yeah, right.
But he'll take his animals from the display inside the venue out and do a little show and show them flying around that.
Wow, very exciting.
Hopefully that's something that will happen.
Yeah,
otherwise he'll just be in there showing all the animals all day.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, dude, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, cheers. Very, very happy to have you guys here.
Yep.
Now, I suppose we should talk about blue tongues, but before we get too deep into it, I know you're known in the industry for your blue tongues and your breeding and that kind of stuff. But you, when did you actually move to Australia?
It would have been 2001. I came as a backpacker.
Right.
Yeah, just out of interest, really. As a sort of kid trying to hang on to his last few kiddie years, and came to check out Australia and ended up staying.
Yeah, right. So it's not like you were in the UK and super interested in reptiles and decided to come over for that reason, right?
Oh, that was part. Australia's always motivated me as a place where I wanted to check out.
But you didn't come here with the goal of being a blue tongue breeder?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
No, that's something that's circumstance driven by my interest in reptiles, which ultimately came about via persistence and
as it always does,
wanting to get more and more animals and creating more and more opportunity for myself to do so. It basically just became something from a passion, you know.
So you're already
to see the end goal before it started, I think, is nigh and impossible. It's just something that's grown.
Yeah. It's hard to plan that far into the future.
I'm from a background of, you know, I have an agricultural science degree. My family are farmers. I've always been around animals, so I suppose once I started on the journey of collecting these things, that it was always, you know, it was in the DNA.
Breeding and husbandry was
it's programmed in there. Yeah. So as the opportunity arose, it sort of filled a void in my life that I sort of inherited too. So
yeah, very cool. So you came over here as a backpacker, got even more interested in our reptiles, I guess, while you were over here? Or?
The first year, really, while I was here, it was more just about recreation. I was just having a look round. But
excellent.
Once I actually managed to acquire a visa and stay, that's when I sort of had the capacity to follow my old interests. I did keep reptiles in the UK.
Yeah.
I've always had something in a tub.
What were you keeping in the UK?
Iguanas, ball pythons, turtles.
All the cool things that we can't get here.
Yeah, well, that's your perception that they're cool. I think it's merely because you can't keep them.
Yeah.
The reality is
all reptile keepers wanting what we can't have.
Yeah, where in the reptile game overseas, the iguana can be considered as a bit of a rodent, if you like. They're a dime a dozen, but to the Australian, certainly a fully mature iguana seems to be the holy grail. But yeah,
beautiful lizards.
They certainly are. Yeah.
Fantastic. And what is it about blue tongues specifically that drew you to them? I guess, like I said, they're kind of there's that relative ease of keeping, at least comparatively. And then there's all those improvements that you yourself made over the few years to your housing methods and stuff like that.
I suppose amongst reptile keepers, you may agree, we are split. We're either snakos or we're lizard keepers.
Yeah.
I know we all like them all.
Yeah.
But I do think that's the starting block for me. I was always naturally interested in four-legged reptiles.
Yeah.
I kept other lizards in the UK, like you said, dragons and iguanas. I'd never really kept any skinks. When I got to Australia, I'd seen blue tongues. I'd read a little bit about the abundance of skink species here, and sort of got interested in skinks, if you like, and it sort of grew from there.
Right.
So, and then noticing online the guys at Snake Ranch having albino and hypermelanistic blue tongues, it immediately was, I got to have those.
Right.
And then it became, if you like, got to catch them all. You got to have them all. So every time there was another phenotype or genotype that popped up, it had to, it became part of the chase too. And then again, it sort of grows from there.
Right. So you're just adding to your collection anytime you're
constantly, and then the interest goes. First, you've got to replicate that particular genotype or phenotype. Then once you've achieved that, you're like, well, how's this how's this particular genotype going to correlate with the other, and what's that going to produce, and
which one's going to be dominant?
And then your genetics comes into play, and all
which
this.
we will be talking into a little bit more about later, and about the genetics of some of these colour morphs. But very interesting. And I understand as well you've got the emerald tree monitors as well, which I have to ask, difficult to keep, but they must be one of the coolest monitors out there, right?
I'd say they're the holy grail for Australian reptile keepers.
Yeah.
They've been on licence in Queensland for some time because of their apparent sightings on Moa Island. They were a keeper managed to get some animals via some kind of reptile rescue in Queensland, and has had them for 5-6 years.
Right.
And I naturally found myself trying to be friendly with that particular individual.
As you do.
So that I could get some myself, and me and a friend have picked up a pair each. And let's hope that that's the start of what for me is absolutely the holy grail of reptiles.
They're phenomenal.
And let's hope we can get them on licence in other states.
Yeah.
Or at least distributed to keepers around Queensland at a price that's affordable.
So you both have breeding pairs at the moment?
Yeah, there's me and a friend that have a pair each. So, and that's very much a share project, i.e., we'll cross-hatch them backwards and forwards till we get some success.
Right, yeah.
And the ultimate goal is, as I said, is to get them in the hands of every keeper in Queensland, or every keeper that wants them, at a price that isn't exorbitant. You know? So.
Fantastic. And obviously Emerald Tree Monitor, the name kind of says it all, but just for our audience who don't know what they're like, do you want to describe them for us?
Well,
you've seen them closer than I have. So.
Yeah, well, they are a monitor lizard, so they're the same family, if you like, as your Parentes, your Spencer's monitors.
Even Komodo dragons.
Yeah, that's right. So if you like, they're a dinosaur, because your last recorded dinosaur was Varanus megalania, which was in Australia.
Yeah.
And we've all watched the movies with what are they called now?
Jurassic Park.
Yeah, Jurassic Park. Yeah, we've all watched Jurassic Park, and that's basically what you're looking at in those movies.
Right.
You're looking at Velociraptor, which has the same sort of head profile as a Panoptes or a Parente. So that's basically what they are. They're the last surviving dinosaurs, and within that they are the most beautiful. They have a striking emerald green coloration, which basically knocks your socks off.
Yeah.
And they're handleable, so they're palm sized, so anybody can keep them. Contrary to what people think, they're not actually that hard to keep. Okay, they're not an entry level reptile, but they tick every box.
Right.
They live in the trees as per their description. They have a prehensile tail, which means their tail is a fifth limb. They literally do swing on that and use it as a fifth foot, if you like. They eat crickets and small invertebrates like that, and little bits of sort of chopped up bird, turkey mince, that kind of stuff.
A little bit of lean meat in there now and again.
Yeah, so it's Yeah,
wow. And they're quite slender as well, sort of dainty little things.
Dainty little things, yeah. They're fascinating.
Yeah.
They really are.
How long have you had them now in your hands?
18 months.
18 months.
Yeah. So
very, very jealous, man, obviously. I'm not the only person, but...
Reaching adult size, so hopefully we'll get some reproductive action in the upcoming season.
So I guess keep an eye out on Facebook at
to see progress on that.
bluetonguelizard.com.au
on
Facebook.
I think we've sort of talked about it. I think he's going to have a couple at the RepX show too.
Ooh.
I'm hoping to take. I'll probably take one there.
Yeah, wonderful.
The males are very confident, sort of outgoing lizards, so I'm hoping to take him. I might leave his wife at home.
Yeah, a little bit shy.
But yes, but I might bring the big fella.
Ooh, very exciting. All right, well, hope we get to see him there.
They have been showed before, so but yeah, this is the next step in this. We need to keep them out there so that people can see them. So
Wow. So very, very busy, obviously, with all these animals and all these plans coming up. And on top of that, as we mentioned, you're a RepX Ambassador. Scott's managed to wrangle you in as one of their ambassador roles. How did he manage that? First of all, get you away from all your reptiles, and what does the ambassador role kind of involve? I guess that's for both of you as well.
I suppose I'd like to cover what it actually means to me. And your first question was, how did Scott manage to wrangle me into doing that? It really didn't take that much wrangling, because I understand what an ambassador is, and I
happy to advocate for reptiles.
Yeah, exactly right. And I've been in the reptile game for some time now. I've sort of climbed the imaginary ladder, if you like, and I do see what I do as presenting a responsibility, if you like, if I want to see this grow in Australia.
Yeah, right.
As time to put a little bit back in. Not, as I said to Scott, some of these commitments you're not necessarily chomping at the bit to take them on, because you've always got other commitments in life, as you just discussed. But certainly to me, it's something I feel that I want to grab with both hands, because where's the next guy going to come from if I can't use what I've done to sort of water the grass and allow other keepers to follow that path, if you like. I certainly see when I got into reptiles, I used to look up to certain individuals, and I reckon I sort of mirror some of those guys now, and I see young kids that sort of approach me quite regularly, wanting to get inside my brain, if you like, to get bits of information about this, that, and the other. And while sometimes it can interfere with what you do, and you do sort of realise it's an obligation. So it's one that I embrace wholeheartedly.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And Scott, what exactly is Joe's role going to be as an ambassador for you guys?
It's not to say that they're necessarily like an employee and they must do this and that and that.
Yeah.
It's really just advocating what RepX is about.
Right.
So it's not to say that they've got to do X role and that and that. It's up to how they interpret that to be done.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's just about encouraging how, RepX is just a conduit by which people can see things.
Right.
Yeah.
They've got to advocate how important it is to see that, basically.
Yeah, and for me, that translates to me. It's an opportunity for me to take some of my best animals, put them on display. It's not, which we'll probably discuss. It's not an opportunity to sell those animals. That's not how I see this. It's an opportunity to put them out there and say, look at how cool these are, and then I'm going to give you a piece of my passion when you ask me about them.
Yeah.
So that people can buy into that and go, geez,
get enthusiastic about it.
I want to do that.
Yeah.
That's my goal, is so that young kid or whoever looks at me and sees what I'm doing and walks away going, I want to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that's a fantastic thing. The more people that we have interested in our native wildlife, I mean, always good.
Joe's the ambassador up in Brisbane, and so it's local to Brisbane. But we also have like Neville Burns, Michael Sumac, and Gavin Bedford.
Right.
So they're coming up as well.
So we've got Neville down in New South Wales. Neville Burns, a famous snake catcher and snake handler and demonstrator.
Yep.
We've got Michael Sumac, the zoologist, photographer, green tree python guy.
He's basically supplied all the reptile photography for the brand.
Fantastic photographer and
zoology
guy up there up there near Townsville. You got Gavin up in
Neville Burns.
Neville
you
Burns.
Mentioned Gavin,
we got Gavin up in Northern Territory, do we?
No. So Michael Sumac's in
Cairns.
Yeah. And I'm not sure because most of the ambassadors are all sorted by John.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure Gavin's down south.
Right. I'm just thinking because he's working with
Gavin Bedford.
He's working.
Gavin
Darwin, because he's working with the Inapelli pythons.
Yeah.
That's why I'm thinking.
But Neville Burns is.
Neville Burns is down south in New South Wales. Yeah.
But anyway, they're all coming up.
Yeah,
so basically everyone will be there. And
Michael
Sumac and Gavin Bedford and Neville Burns all have their own tables and stuff.
All legends in their own right in the
Yeah. But they all have the same role as Joe does. So it's all about advocating what reptiles are about. They're just associated with RepX, but RepX is just how that is delivered to the public.
Yeah, right.
Basically.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, look, we'll get back to RepX in a little bit, but let's talk lizards while we got you here, of course. Now, before we get deep into the blue tongues, do you keep reptiles yourself? No.
I mean,
just an interested reptile fan.
I probably could, but I'm more. I could be in dogs, cats, or whatever. If there's a problem, I'll fix it. It's basically
right.
the role of how I work.
Yeah, right. Okay.
I appreciate reptiles. I used to hate, not so much hate, but I used to have that childish kind of
fear
aversion and stuff of snakes and stuff.
Yeah.
But since being exposed to them through my business partner, who at the time owned like 20 snakes or something,
yeah,
I got over that. And
yeah.
it's easy.
Right. So a bit more of an, an enthusiast and appreciator of reptile.
Yeah, but that's essentially what I'd like to encourage with people who come to the show, because it's not just about reptile.
Oh yeah, you don't have to be an
general
absolute
public
reptile freak to come and enjoy yourself.
Yeah,
because I guess a kind of mini goal of mine is to not that I'd abolish it, but minimise the amount of times that people use that phrase, a good snake is a dead snake.
Yeah.
Because it's not really... There's a lot of people that are saying it just because they think there's something bad. Do you know what I mean?
It's an uneducated.
Yeah.
Knowledge
So basically,
is
it's an
power and all
education
that.
tool as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot to
We
it.
fear what we don't understand.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that. Yeah, it basically lies in those
So
few words.
I'm basically representing that very person I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I used to be that, and now I'm not because
Yeah.
I was educated.
Fantastic. And the more we can do that, the better.
Yeah.
Excellent. So, all right, let's talk blue tongues. Now, personally, I started keeping reptiles with blue tongues. I started when I lived down in Melbourne with Nigra lutea. So we put out Nigra lutea.
Okay. Some blotchies.
Yeah, the little blotchies down there. I got them when I was 5-6 years old, I think. So this was in Melbourne, and we're using indoor enclosures with lighting and heating and thermostats and doing everything very enclosed. We had this very broad diet of lean meat, always getting snails and making sure that they're in a tub for a little while so they haven't been pelleted or poisoned. Tin foods, fruit and veg, and then we moved to Queensland. Everything's far too hot. We don't need all of that heating anymore. Things get humid and funky rather quickly. So I guess being based here in Brisbane, you do things a little bit differently than what we would have been doing down in Melbourne.
I have my own methods, but that certainly doesn't mean I look negatively on other methods. There is a lot of different ways to keep animals, and there are a lot of variables that you need to consider within your circumstances to how you need to go about doing things. For instance, yourself keeping maybe 1 or 2 blotchies down south, if you want to put it in a vivarium and you want to offer 20 different types of food and this, that and the other, knock yourself out.
Absolutely nothing wrong with keeping them that way.
That's right. But when it comes to keeping larger numbers of animals, and like you say, in different states and different levels of humidity, etc., you need to start looking at different husbandry techniques if you're going to achieve what some of your goals. And for me, the biggest one of those is finding a diet which suits all. It's palatable, it's got everything in it, and it actually stops the animal sorting through and picking out the little bits that it does or it doesn't like. And across a larger number of animals, I find that is key. And also it has to be something that doesn't get flyblown in 5 minutes, for want of a better expression. And in humid conditions, you've got all that to think about too. So
that's very interesting. That if you even though you might be providing them a broad variety of foods, they might only be picking 2 items that they enjoy, because in the wild they're getting them from a different source.
That's right. That's a concept that a lot of people don't understand when they chop up for little Lizzie a bowl that's got 20 different colours of different things in there, and they think they've created a smorgasbord, but essentially what they've done is like offering a child 30 choices. He's just going to take out the chocolate bars and
leave the salad.
Leave the salad,
That's very interesting. So that high humidity, the fungal bacterial infection, I guess issues up here. So you're going basically a dry food mix a lot of the time, are you?
Yeah, I took it to an extreme, to be honest, and then I've deviated back again because these kind of things are always up for review and what does and doesn't work.
Well, you always fluctuate around an optimal.
Yeah, and that's
get closer and closer.
Yeah, and I found a middle ground now, but the original concept was to take away from using these perishable food items and to find something that is suitable, tasty, and covers all bases. And it's not really rocket science, and it doesn't take much of a genius to look round to see that there's precedents for this already out there. In the dog and cat world is probably your best example, with all their dried foods that cover a nutritional balance for those particular animals. Yes, there's still advocates of that, and people do and don't like it, but essentially it's accepted that to feed a dog and cat these days you can use these dry foods that cover their nutritional needs, and you don't have to be going to the butchers to get chopped up bones and offal and this and that and the other, and however we used to keep these animals years ago. And I applied the same principle basically to blue tongues.
Right.
And I sought after a dried food that was suitable for them. And not only that, it could be left there 24/7 so that they could eat it ad libitum.
And it's a solid hard dry pebble, or is it sort of a medium?
Originally it was. There was actually a lizard food already formulated for this.
Yeah, there is various standard
I'm not
pellets.
trying to say that I was the first to think of this, far from it, but I suppose I was the first to really put it to the test, and I found a lizard product and put it down for every lizard and just left it there, and you found that some took it, some didn't, some absolutely no interest at all. But then you found that if you kept it fresh, you got more of an uptake over time because hunger drives more interest, etc.
Yeah, right.
And I started having some success with it, but it was never quite hit the goals that I wanted to. But then I saw another keeper trying some cat biscuits, and I thought, well, why not give that a shot? The guys at Purina must have invested some thought process somewhere along the line.
Well, I mean, you've got all the nutritional things that you need on the packet there. So as long as it's got the vitamin D.
That's right. There's even D3 within those products. So there's everything in there.
Yeah.
And so I went along that line and I hit them all with this dried cat food and got basically a 75% uptake on that across all my animals, and I found that their live weight gain was increased because I was able to have it out all the time and fresh all the time. Because it is a product that doesn't. Yes, you have to change it. You can't leave it there. You have to change it, but you can leave it there all the time with minimal fuss.
It's not like raw chicken.
You don't have to wash up bowls every second day. It's all. And then you found that stool constituency improved, because you were getting the same uniform mouthful all the time. You basically improve the environment of the lizard, and you got a uniform response, which is what you're looking for. Because these animals, contrary to what people think, these animals are not in the wild; they're in captivity. And if you're trying to mimic stuff in the wild, that is often a big failing with reptiles. There is certain things you're looking to imitate when keeping reptiles in captivity, but to think that you can replicate everything in the wild is a dangerous path.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess it's always kind of the toss-up. Do you want to try to replicate natural conditions, or do you want to make it as comfortable, happy, and healthy as possible, whatever that means?
Well, I think you have to pick what the reptile is looking for in those natural conditions.
Yeah.
And usually there's a
not parasites and predators.
Yeah, that's right. They're looking to hide from those. There's a triangle of needs really with a reptile. They're looking for safety, which is a hide. They're looking for
flies
the right temperature and a decent food source.
Yeah, right.
And if you supply those three, you're going to get healthy animals.
Yeah.
Like you say, I don't need to supply parasites and a predator
to keep them healthy.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, fantastic. And again, with that lower water intake, their excreta is less You know, there's less fluid.
Yeah, it's
fluid
uniform
through,
because you know you're getting that balanced diet. You know yourself. You only have to apply it to yourself if you eat your greens and you eat everything that's put in front of you, or you eat a supposed balanced diet as opposed to hanging out down at the takeaway all the time. And you know,
I guess what we should explain as well about blue tongues is that they kind of slide around on their belly. They've got these short little legs and then a tail behind it. So anytime that they do excrete something, they're kind of dragging their tail through it a little bit. Yeah. So if you're feeding them kind of a wet snail and vegetable-based diet, and you've got a really watery poop every time, it's going to be increasing that humidity content as well.
That's it. But having said that, on top of that, you know, I have changed it, and I do now create a midpoint. I've created a wet product that I can go in weekly over the top of the dried food to give them that sort of point of interest to keep them going.
Right.
So you know that's
so they don't get bored with it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's it. It's basically a patty, if you like. I either use turkey mince or beef mince, mix in egg yolk, mix in a bit of calcium powder, and a few sort of the things that they love.
Yeah, right.
Mix in a little bit of powdered format of that dried food so that it's not completely... it's a wet product, but it's not something that's sloppy. You know what I mean? Right. So you do need to tick both boxes, but yeah, fantastic.
And as for the outdoor enclosures as well, like it's they're fascinating to me because most outdoor enclosures that you see are either big cage systems or pits, basically. Yours look kind of more like a sort of elevated guinea pig hutch.
Well, that's basically where they came from, but I suppose to rewind that a little bit, when I first started keeping lizards in Australia, I was fascinated by this term pit, and I'll be honest, in a negative kind of way. It was like,
it doesn't sound.
It doesn't sound very appealing, and my experience.
It's the lizard pit.
My experience of setting one of these things up was 100% negative, because you put in half a dozen solitary animals into this large area and watch them all punch on.
Yeah.
And then you created stress across the whole group, which then led to a whole assortment of issues within that group. And only probably the couple at the top of the food chain, if you like, were the ones that did well. So.
Yeah, right.
I created one of these pits and found that then I needed to split it up, and then so on top of that, I just saw in a pet shop a single rabbit hutch, if you like. Well, it wouldn't be a rabbit hutch in Queensland. It's a guinea pig hutch. I perceived it to be a rabbit hutch, but that's essentially
not here in Queensland.
Yeah, but that's essentially what they're called, regardless of what you keep in them. They're rabbit hutches, and I thought, hey, that could work quite well, you know. You've got the compartment at the back, it's raised off the floor, so you know, it's not going to get too wet. You've got the chance for sunlight to come in from the sides, the top, which covers you for all different times of the year. And I got a few of these and modified them.
Was there a lot of modifications you need to make, or
not really? You know, you can find ones that are pretty almost already there.
Almost set to go.
Yeah. Depends on the model, I suppose, but not difficult to make from scratch too. If you have half.
If you've got the woodworking skills,
yeah,
which I do not.
But even then, you know,
make a wonky table.
That's right. Yeah, and that enables me to, you know, within my animal keeping, I have every different scenario, which enables me to get out of jail, if you like, on the topic of UV and all these different perceptions that people have for animals' needs. I can have animals outdoors for a period of time, I can have them indoors. Some do better indoors, some do better outdoors, you know, and being able to offer all these options gives me the results I need. Yeah.
Fantastic. Wow. That's I guess a lot easier than I had thought. I thought you'd have to do a fair bit to these hutches to kind of get them ready for a blue tongue, but the requirements aren't really that different, I suppose.
No, there's a compartment at the back that allows entry for the animal in and entry for the animal out, and then the front bit is essentially a bask area.
And rain and humidity just...
Well, I suppose that there's that piece which, you know, here in Australia you've got weather. It's always some kind of deluge. It's either heat deluge or rain deluge. Yeah, there's plenty in between, but you have to prepare yourself for the lowest common denominator.
Yeah.
Because one day of the year there's enough heat to kill any animal in a wooden box, let alone
Yeah.
you know, a reptile that likes a bit of heat. So what I do with that is I have a decent grade of tarpaulin which I hover above the cages, so they basically use as a shade sail.
Right, and just a bit of draft coming through.
A bit of draft. So on a hot day, the draft is coming through, and
Yeah.
it keeps it at shade temperatures.
Nice and simple.
That's right, and on a rainy day, it just falls on it and just runs off, you know. And then on your ambient days, you can take the tarps away and let them have what nature's offering.
Fantastic.
Yes, of course, there's a bit of labour involved, but there is no set and forget with reptiles. That's another perception people think. They think they can set something up and leave them alone.
Yeah, it's
I don't think that's possible. I think you've always got to be looking at making tweaks to any setup that you've got at different times of the year to read your reptile's behaviour and make sure they're doing the right things.
Well, they need the right, you know, diurnal thermal cycles and things like that. Especially if you want to get them to breed, you need to cool things, and so you do need to provide that seasonality, I suppose.
Yeah.
Well, is there any common misconceptions, I suppose, with blue tongues? We've covered the humidity thing, but health-wise and I guess husbandry-wise, what's the most common thing people get wrong that you see?
I think the trap that most people fall into is they and it happens all the time on social media. It becomes a shit fight, if you like, or this is wrong and this is right.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't need UV. Yes, you do. You can't feed them that. You can't do this. I think that, as we touched on earlier, there's so many different ways to do things, and a little bit of everything, if done correctly, is going to enrich the animal's life. And I think that for me is the biggest misconception, is that people enter into a lot of these things with a closed mind, and they don't have an open thought process around all the different ways and means to. Just because I do this doesn't mean you have to.
So the biggest misconception is that there is, you know, only one way to boil an egg.
Yeah, that's right, and that, you know, and my way's right.
Yeah.
You know, and that I feel is the biggest hang up in reptile keeping in general.
Yeah.
To be honest.
It's essentially the efficiency of what you can do.
Yeah.
So there's no point, if Joe can do this because he can, and that suits his environment and that's how he works, then if someone else thinks, oh, I have to do that, but I don't have enough money to do that, well, then there'll be a way to compromise on that, still do the same thing in your budget. So it's more about...
Exactly, maybe have less animals and use
it's
a bit
an
more
efficiency
of a,
thing, really.
Yeah, and that's why sometimes I'm not the best person for everybody to formulate their model on, because I have formulated my model to house quite a few animals. So, you know, when I talk about that dried food and all that, that suits my system. You know, but if you've only got 2 blue tongues, go to town, do whatever you like.
And you're not going to be having to feed that many that you.
You don't need to buy 10 kilo bags of dried food. You know, like that's, you know, you can
shoveling it into.
You can find a different method that works for you.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, look. I guess once you got all the housing and husbandry stuff, how much work do these guys need to get breeding? I mean, we spoke about cooling a little bit before, but is it hard to get blue tongues into the breeding mode?
I don't think so. I personally think with breeding any animal, it's all about the care and the husbandry side. If you get the basics right, they're programmed to breed.
Right.
You know, if you've got your animals at 110% capacity health-wise, or 100%, whatever you want to see. If you've got them looking good, you've got them in good nick, they're going to breed.
Yeah, right.
You know, you can't. But you know, God has already been played, if you like. It's already in there. It's already in their makeup to breed.
Yeah.
If you've got those animals eating properly, thermoregulating properly, you've got all that set up, they'll breed when the season comes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Excellent. And cooling wise, we spoke about that, which might be a bit harder, I guess, up here to achieve for some of the southern blotchies, or I guess southern species.
It's a good point, but essentially I haven't had too many dramas. I've had a few problems with Tasmanian animals,
Right.
but
Cooling, by the way, is providing an artificial winter to kind of stimulate spring to get everything reproductive, just for our audience at home.
yeah, I found with 90% of the reptiles I've kept that if you let them, adults anyway, if you let them cop the natural nighttime heat, i.e. don't use any heat at night, then you will find that they cycle pretty well.
Just let them use a natural season.
Let them, yeah, and that's another thing with keeping reptiles is, yes, we have all these thermostats, lights, and this and that and the other. At the end of the day, a reptile seeks a bit of heat in the morning. He'll then go and find some shelter middle of the day, and then he'll probably come out again for a little bit more heat late in the day.
Yeah.
And then at night, he'll cop the natural nighttime heat, natural nighttime temperatures. So if you do that, then they will breed. That natural cooling process will occur. When you start getting into May, the nighttime temperatures will drop. You will notice that your animals go off their food a little bit. So you, in essence, you're noticing them going into a natural cooling cycle. By the time June comes, they will stop feeding if you've continued to let them have natural nighttime temperatures.
Yeah.
Then through July the same, and then all of a sudden you'll start getting a little pickup in nighttime temperatures,
A little bit more activity.
a little bit more activity, and
Ready
your
to go.
breeding triggers will happen naturally.
Yeah.
Yes, you can influence these, but you need to influence them within that pattern.
Right.
So if you've got them in your shed or whatever, you know, start picking up your heat in the day in sort of August,
Yeah.
you know, July, August, you know, as the natural weather would go.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Just match what's happening.
Match what's happening. Yeah. Don't try and recreate the wheel.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So once you've got them breeding, obviously, for people such as yourself producing morphs, it's time to start selecting for some things.
Yeah.
Is that how a lot of the morphs come about? Like, or do you find a specific thing? Like, do you find a black hypermelanistic, pick that one to start a line from, or are you getting a lot more of your morphs just popping up out of your breeding collection?
Morphs. There's basically, if you rewind it, morphs come from two different places. Or are comprised of two different things. You've got a true genetic morph like albinism, which is a recessive, which follows Mendelian law. So that's a straight.
It's a recessive mutation.
Yeah, that's right. And or you can get a specific trait that you pick, and it's a polygenic trait. So that poly means many. So there's many genes in play, and in those instances you need to line breed it.
Right. So after a bit of line breeding, you may actually find those traits lead together.
You can strengthen a trait that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've got true genetic traits and you've got polygenic traits.
Yeah.
And over time there's quite a few of both that have popped up.
Yeah.
Then from that, you then start to pair different traits together. So you pair different genetic traits together, and you compare genetic traits to polygenic traits to improve the existing genetic trait.
Right.
So you're using one on the other to try to understand what effect that particular trait will have on the other.
When it interacts with the other trait.
Which will then give you another morph.
It's very interesting. So you're basically crossing, the specific lines once you've got them a little bit line bred and seeing what comes out of it.
Yeah, like for instance with an albino, you might go, right, so you've got your albino there, so what would improve that? It doesn't necessarily need to be visual either. It can be just for vigor's sake. Or that's a particularly strong line of animals there, has plenty of babies, never gets sick in the winter, eats all its tucker.
Yeah.
That extra size, etc. So you can improve a mutation that way.
Yeah.
And it, like I say, it doesn't necessarily have any huge visual improvement. But on top of that, you can do it through visual means too. But at the same time, you're always trying to keep them as strong as possible. But you're always trying to change the
Maintain
appearance.
that trait.
Yeah. So It's
difficult little balance.
I would say that's become more apparent over the years. It's a balance.
Yeah.
It's easy to go, I'll put that with that to make that, when really it's no.
Yeah.
There's a few other considerations you need to put into play first.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, it is interesting how many of the morphs end up being pretty simple sort of Mendelian recessive or basic co-dominant traits.
Yeah.
Does it take a lot of work to kind of line breed a lot of those traits, or do have a lot of them just by chance popped up? You get a nice recessive trait, and then
usually you'll find
it's very popular in the industry very quickly, and it spreads.
Yeah, usually you'll find there's an instance of a founder animal that's found in the wild, or has popped up in a collection.
Yeah, rather than selectively, progressively breeding for a darker or lighter individual.
You can get that too, where you pick up a certain animal and you think, that's got a specific trait.
Yeah, let's see if we can amplify it.
That happened to me with some blotched blue tongues, where I saw it in one particular animal and thought, that's something that I could work with. I'm sure it'll just be some kind of polygenic trait that I line bred.
Yeah.
What it actually proved out to be was a co-dominant mutation, but there was a further superform that came out of that.
Yeah.
And you started pairing the related animals. So you can actually find that there's genetic traits that sit there over and above what you find, if you catch what I mean. Basically, you can find a visual het for something.
Yeah.
Looks a little bit different. You go, I'll work with that, and then suddenly something else pops
Something
out.
fascinating.
Entirely different comes from that. Yeah.
That's very interesting. Now, we were also talking about the polygenic thing. So, if you've got multiple genes affecting one trait. We've also got the opposite, which is pleiotropy. You've got one gene affecting multiple traits. So, and we did speak about health as well. So I guess a lot of the time when you're selecting for a specific thing like the albinism or the melanism, how often is there negative traits hitchhiking along with that? Do you find that that's hard to deal with? Or?
I think it can be, but that's that will always be apparent in any genetic breeding, because if you breed related animals, you're going to increase what they call homozygosity.
Linkage disequilibrium.
Yeah, that's right. And what I mean by homozygosity is that more often than not, any trait, whether it be a perceived positive trait or a negative trait, comes about when two copies of a gene are put together, and you're going to get an increased incidence of that when you breed related animals.
Yeah.
So,
which is essentially what you're after for certain traits.
But you're also going to get a few mongrel traits in there that you're trying to kick out. So you have to understand what's going on, and you have to be able to select accordingly.
Yeah.
So that within a litter, you need to be able to pick your strongest animals that are displaying the traits that you want, and not be suckered in when you've got an animal that's displaying the traits that you want, but it's a bit weak, or it's this or that, the other, Some of those are okay for pets, but they're not going to formulate what you're going to use.
And not going to be good for the downstream line, to have those genes in your breeding population.
Yeah. A lot of if you do some background reading, a lot of it's been done, especially with rats and things like that.
Right.
You can find some very simple reading online that covers a lot of that stuff, with recessive and homozygous situations, which, ultimately, just because you line breed, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have all unhealthy animals. With the right breeding, you can form a homozygous trait that kicks out all the nasty traits.
Right.
And then further related breedings actually stop other nasties coming in because you've kicked them out. So
there's a lot of work going on.
There's a lot of thought process in it, because a lot of people fall into the trap of thinking that related breedings causes problems. Yes. But also, if it's done correctly, you can kick out.
And you can eliminate
problems too.
Yeah.
So,
right.
And once you've kicked them out, they're not going to come back in because you've got a closed gene pool.
Yeah. Very interesting. Scott, have you had a chance to see any of Joe's? Have you had a chance to go over there and see any of those crazy melanistics?
He's due. He's doing some work for me.
I'm going to be coming over to do some stuff, but that'll be later.
So you've been a bit more like me, just stalking reptile people online.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily stalk, because one of my ways that I've been able to advertise my brand across the world is I am part of 140 groups around the world. And basically I just use it as a platform to share my posts and stuff within the reasons of the advertising rules and that kind of thing.
Right.
But essentially, my feed
is now full
just
of reptiles.
a giant list of reptiles. I do turn notifications off for ones that are particularly, over the top in a way. But in addition to that, I also have like 2,500 friends on Facebook that I use as a networking ability.
Yeah,
so
right.
I see reptiles come up from time to time. So I do get across things. Joe's on that list, so I see some of his posts from time to time. So it's obviously based on how Facebook does it, but yes, I do see reptiles from time to time, but I don't really search it out. I only ever go searching for something if I'm trying to fix a problem, basically.
Right. So he's probably going to have to drag you over there to get you to...
Yeah, well,
at some point.
It's in the pipes.
yeah.
Excellent. All right, look, I suppose we should talk a little bit about these morphs and some of the coloration that you're trying to achieve. Just before we get into it too much, a little primer on reptile coloration. So it's mostly reptile coloration is actually produced by cells called chromatophores, which are mostly in the dermal layer, just underneath the epidermis. So for example, you have melanophores, which produce melanin. You got xanthophores, which are cells producing red or yellow pteridines, or yellow carotenoids, which are, I think, plant-based and dietary, picked up from food.
Yeah.
On top of these, there's also iridophores, which produce structural colors, which are very fascinating cells. They're basically light reflecting, refracting off these crystalline reflecting platelets, strange little organelles, and their arrangement and orientation and the type of purine molecules that are on these little stacked ladders, whether they're adenine, hypoxanthine, and guanine. The way they refract and reflect light interacts with the other chromatophores to produce a variety of vibrant colors, including blues, greens, whites, and more. So basically, when you're breeding for genes, breeding for color, you're looking for genes that control variation in development and depositing of these chromatophores.
To me, I'm always looking for a contrast.
Right.
So, if you put two phenotypes together, say you're picking two morphs that look pretty similar, and you're looking to create a new morph, you're probably looking down the wrong alleyway. You really need to be looking at two contrasts to ultimately figure out what the middle ground is going to be between the two.
So explain to us what you mean by contrast.
For instance, you've got, I'll use the and I suppose this is the best example to use because the result itself has created a morph that everybody wants. The pictures of them just blow people away.
Yeah.
And it really is the best illustrator. You've got an albino which takes out melanin, right? So it takes out all your browns and your blacks.
So you've got no melanophores, no browns and blacks,
That's
which makes a blue-tongued lizard look
yellow and orange.
fantastic.
You
It's
know?
still got its erythrocytes
Yeah,
and
that's
its
right.
xanthophores.
Yep, that's right.
So
They're
it's
all
still
still there. So
producing-
you've got a yellowy orange animal.
Yeah.
Then you've got a hypermelanistic animal, which basically, well, by definition, it's an increase in black. But the hypermelanism in the blue tongue, it's not just that. There's also a further excitement in there of your oranges and yellows and so on and so forth.
So it's just an increase in expression of all the chromatophores.
Pretty much the whole bucket.
But the main one that's coming out is melanin is
And
massively
and
overexpressed.
it's called hypermelanistic because the black masks everything else that's
Right.
going on. So it looks black. So it's hypermelanistic. But the reality of that animal is there's a lot more going on in there. So it always, and it's not just me that found this interesting. You looked at this animal, you could see it had a blaze orange belly.
Yeah.
But the interest was always going to be, what's he going to look like if you take that black away?
Yeah.
And that's what the albino could do. And by contrast, that's what I'm talking about. You've got your albino here and your black here. They're both the opposite ends of the spectrum.
Wow. So you're taking out you're basically using the albinism to take out
the black.
Take out the black, but leave it with massive
To see what's
overexpression
underneath.
of everything else. The iridophores, the xanthophores, and the
That's right.
erythrophores are all massively expressed in these individuals. And what's that morph called? That's your...
It was the I suppose it is the morph that really turned people's heads in the reptile world to notice that the potential of blue tongues. I was fortunate enough to be the first to produce it, and I called it a larva.
Right.
So it basically was just as the name described. It was just molten orange.
Yeah, beautiful hot
To the
orange.
point where people think you've doctored your photos, but it's not. You know,
Turn the contrast way up.
It's just out of control.
Yeah.
You know, you've literally got, as much as that animal is black, the hypermelanistic, the orange matches that. It's literally just, yeah.
Yeah, right. So it's like basically take an albino blue tongue, which would be yellow and red, and then just really crank that yellow and red up. And
Yeah,
it still has
basically
that creamy colour as well in some parts of it as well.
Yeah,
right?
that's right. But you've literally done that. You've just turned up the volume on all the colour that's already there on an albino.
That's very cool.
Yeah, and I suppose to add further to that, the other classic that's been done across quite a few reptiles is what will happen when you take the oranges and yellows out of the albino,
Yeah,
and that's
right.
done with an axanthic animal or an anery. It's the same thing. Essentially, pulls out your yellows and your oranges too.
Well, axanthic would be to, no xanthophores, which our xanthophores are the yellow carotenoid containing xanthophores, which are generally yellow, or your erythrophores are red. So anerythric is anerythrophore, non-erythrophore containing.
That's right. In the reptile world, they both almost fall into the same bucket. It's okay to sit and talk about the differences between those two traits, but essentially the result is the same.
Sure.
And through polygenics, it's actually very difficult to decide which is which. I've found, and I've named one an anery, and then I found that it was actually something else that was putting the yellow in there.
Right.
And further down the track, figured out that it was probably axanthic. So. Yeah.
The terminology there's a little bit hard to...
But essentially, to go back to what we were saying is, we've just cranked the orange up on the albino. Now we can get the albino, and we can put axanthic in there, and we can turn the oranges down.
Yeah, right.
So we can now we've got an albino that's white, and we've got an albino that's orange.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, and then it goes on from there as other traits are added. So, but that's the crux of it, basically.
Very cool. Now, look, there seems to be a lot of albino lines happening. I guess they must be pretty hard to find. When you get one, I mean, in humans, it's about 1 in 18,000 rate of tyrosine negative albinism. Now, we should probably speak about the different types of albinism here really quickly. Albinism being an error in melanosynthesis. You have the amino acid tyrosine being converted into melanin through the process of melanosynthesis. It's 2 oxidation steps involving the catalytic enzyme tyrosinase, which first turns tyrosine into dihydroxyphenylalanine, or DOPA, which is then oxidized to dopaquinone. Dopaquinone itself is then turned into either pheomelanin or eumelanin. So if you don't have that tyrosinase, there's no oxidation reactions to produce dopa or dopaquinone. No melanin synthesis at all happens at all. And this is the tyrosinase negative or T negative albinos, occurring in about 1 in 20,000 people. Even in humans, at the gene TYR, the tyrosinase gene. So I guess that's what everybody's looking for with what most people are getting with most of their albinos. But we're kind of starting to see a few tyrosinase positive mutations.
And I suppose it's a good point to say with blue tongues there are 2 forms of albino in the blue tongues. There is your T negative and there's your T positive.
Okay.
There is a lot of variation through the T negatives now, and a lot of people get confused and think that there's multiple different types, but essentially there is only one line of T negative albinism in blue tongues. It all comes from the original Snake Ranch line, and
they're not producing melanin.
And there's lots of variation. This is a bugbear of mine. It's people's interpretation of the word line. For me, there's only one line of albinos. The rest is either a combination or an outbreeding or a variation of that line.
Okay.
And to me, once that keeps it simple so people understand. Once you start getting too much of that talk in there,
Right.
People, and then you get people, oh, this is my line, and then the negativity of reptile.
Yeah, then it pops its ugly head up once again.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And the reason I like it like that is because then when another line does come along, it keeps it simple. So you've now got your T plus albinos, which is a northern blue tongue.
Yeah, right.
So you've got a T plus albino and a T negative albino, and it keeps it simple. That's all there is. The rest is just people's work on top of those with those traits.
Right.
Your T positive, you described it in a scientific sense, is slightly different to your T negative in the sense that, what's the best way to describe it? This is the most simplistic way for me to describe it to what I would call an intelligent ignoramus. By that I mean somebody who has no understanding of what you're talking about, but is intelligent enough to take on board what you're saying.
I'm right here, dude. Let's go.
Let's go. So your T negative takes out all your black, whereas your T positive just denatures the black and leaves you with a different colour.
Right.
So it's still an albino in the sense that it's having an effect on melanin, but it leaves you with a different tone of colour, and that's usually expressed in the early days of these animals, a quite striking lavender coloration, and then as they age it becomes sort of a caramel colour.
Lavender to caramel. It's not what I would expect from melanin, but I guess in combination with all the other chromatophores that are in the skin.
That's the way they seem to express.
Yeah.
I'm probably not the best scientifically with a lot of this stuff, but I have seen a lot of these animals, and for whatever reason, and it's the same in the one of the T plus Enclosures. When they're born, you've got sort of these vibrant colours, and then as they age, it seems to mottle out into either a silvery colour or some kind of caramelly colour.
Lavender caramel blue tongues.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And are they common on the market at the moment?
Well, there is a small group that I'm working with at the moment. They will be common over the next 4 to 5 seasons.
Wow.
And again, they offer more combination opportunities. So what's a T plus albino going to look like when it's paired to a hypermelanistic albino? Bearing in mind that the T plus albino makes your melanin look purple, if you like.
Wow.
Are we going to get a full purple blue tongue? And that's what I mean about looking at
a full lavender.
Yeah, that's right. That's what I mean about looking at contrast. If you pair a T plus to a T negative albino, are you really going to get something striking? Yeah, you're going to get a bit of variation, but it's only probably going to be subtle because you've got two animals that are on that side of the spectrum already. Yeah. Whereas, I'd like to look at what a T plus does to an xanthic, because that's just got black and white. So you're going to get your lavender and white. And what it's going to do to a hypermelanistic, because you're going to get a solid. You know what I mean? To me, it's always about this side and that side, and let's get that middle animal. If you're going to change the game,
yeah,
it's good to
and
do
if you
all
want
these
something
combos.
unique,
yeah, it's great. All these combos probably will all get done,
yeah,
and it's great to see them all. But ultimately,
now's the time to get into it, hey?
Well, it's all about the game changer,
yeah.
and that for me is.
Well, I look forward to seeing the lavender blue tongue whenever it comes out. Well, look, if anybody else is interested in seeing a lot of these stunning animals, such as the lavas, the snows, as we mentioned, they're all going to be down. You're going to have the opportunity on March 25th at the RepX Brisbane Reptile Expo, held at the International Convention Centre Brisbane Showgrounds. As an ambassador, Joe, I imagine you'll be there with some of your lizards for everyone to come and check out.
I certainly will.
Yeah, and what else are you bringing for us? You bring lots of. You're bringing the lava blue tongues. You bring
I'll give a good spread of all those crazy colour morphs.
Hypermelanistics, of course.
That's right. There'll be
the jet blacks.
One of all those, but I'll also try. I'll bring some of my monitors. I'm working on a method that I can get a couple of the bigger guys there too.
I've
also got a few of the rarer morph carpet pythons. So I'm going to try and put on a spread across 3 different species.
Fantastic.
3 different genus, if you like. So, and the morphs that exist within those. So,
right.
I was given the role of being an ambassador, so I better deliver.
Well,
Was sort of my approach to it.
I'm sure you will. It sounds like you're going to have a pretty amazing display there. So I'm looking forward to seeing it, man.
Yeah.
It sounds awesome. Are you getting up to anything else on the day? Or are you going to be pretty busy there with those?
I'll be
those
busy
displays?
with those, but I think John and Scott have got a couple of things that they want me to do on top of that. So
Yeah, right.
I'll just tackle that when it
Check
pops
out the
up.
displays.
Yeah.
See what everybody else is bringing
Yeah.
to the game.
Yeah.
All right, and I understand at least, as we mentioned, you're not the only ambassador, so it's not all on your shoulders. There's going to be
No, there's a few of us there. So.
you guys.
Yeah, a
handling
few
that.
of the people that I've always looked up to. So
Yeah,
a few
fantastic.
people that I saw as ambassadors a few years ago. So I suppose it represents a bit of a journey to me and a destination all in the same.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. I really can't wait to see a lot of these morphs in particular that you're going to be having there. But I guess Scott, we should find out how's everything looking for the big day.
It's obviously a big organisational kind of nightmare in way, but it's all building up to getting there, and that we've got some booths and tables that we need to fill up, but essentially the entire process is just going to, I guess.
Yeah.
Probably shouldn't have done that.
Okay.
What's that?
The entire process, it basically needs you to, what do you call it, adapt to how things are at the time.
Right.
So I have a plan, and it doesn't necessarily go that way, but that doesn't mean that I give up on it.
able to roll with
I
the
just have to
punches a
adapt to
little
it.
bit. Yeah.
So one of the issues we had is, and it comes down to the legislation that is in Queensland.
Right.
And as everyone knows, you can't sell reptiles and whatever in shows and whatever.
Yeah.
And so while that may be the case, they do have allocation that allow people to have their animals there. But the stipulation is that they can't promote their animal. They can't promote their businesses by using their animals as tools for promotion.
Right. Of
So
course.
basically, it means no signs, no shirts, no business cards, anything like that. But that's purely because these laws were made about 30 years ago. So they're essentially out of step with today.
Right.
So people may think that the DHP is all against them and everything, but that's not the case. They're really actually on your side. It's just they've got to follow laws that they have to, by the way that they are,
Yeah.
enforce.
They didn't make the rules.
Yeah, they didn't make the rules. They were made by people 30 years ago who weren't as educated as people are today.
No, they're
because
just doing their job.
They're just doing their job, and the environment is different.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, these are restrictions that are on us as organisers to get people to have a show where there's animals to see. So a way that we're getting around that is we thought, okay, let's make there's like an area that's for reptile recreational keepers.
Yeah.
So typically that's places that you expect to be filled with breeders, right?
Yeah.
Now breeders normally would want to come out and be able to sell on the day, but they can't, so we need to compromise on that. So we're saying that these tables are free for the recreational keepers on the proviso that they have animals to show and whatever.
Yeah.
There is these restrictions, but it's really about getting the show to have that impact we want.
Yeah.
And you can say that it's about us having a more successful show, but us to have a successful show is not just about financially whether it's successful. It has to be successful in the way that it delivers the right impact.
And
if
it promotes the
and it can
community and
keep
promotes
doing
reptiles
that,
and
yeah, and if it keeps doing that, you can do the next year and so on. And this all ties into how we are engaging with government to get the legislation changed.
right.
Because if you go to them with essentially what is something out of the back shed, they're probably not going to engage with you. But you've got to be on their level.
Yeah. Right.
They need to see that they're doing something good for the community, and the best way to do that is show that you are on level with them, so that you're talking the same language in terms of presentation. So that's why the show has to be much more elevated than normally they are.
Yeah.
And so that's another reason why we're taking around Australia, so that we can introduce that, whether the legislation component to other states or just as a whole, bring a much, essentially bring the show aspect of reptiles to another level,
Yeah.
and bring it up to what people who aren't in reptiles have expected from other event spaces like food and wine show and all that kind of thing.
Right. Okay.
Otherwise, you'll always be just reptile people doing a
hobbyist.
hobby thing.
Yeah,
You got to
right.
bring it up to that point where other people accept that it's better than it is.
Yeah, right.
It's all perceptions and impressions and that kind of thing. So
Yeah, crazy.
my signage background, and may as well do that. So
Yeah, massive undertaking, like I was saying. Is there any the displays that you yourself are pretty excited about? Is there something that you're...
I've never. I mean, I've seen eagles, but I've never seen an eagle. So I'm really interested to go see the eagle in there.
Yeah. Big,
reptile-
powerful bird, that big.
Oh
up
yeah.
close, yeah.
Like reptile displays and that. Not being someone who really knows species and the differences in that, I'm just generally interested in seeing anything.
Anything and everything.
I
Yeah,
have
right.
invertebrates coming in a way that I was planning on having like personal keepers of their invertebrates, but it didn't turn out that way. However, we're going to have demonstrator. We've got another way that you can see some invertebrates.
That's
So
cool.
there's that element there.
Yeah, the invertebrate thing is
But
really cool.
We're
That's
essentially
fantastic.
that mixture of reptiles, birds of prey, and invertebrates is something we'll be taking to every show we do. So that's
very
something
cool.
that always will occur in some degree.
Sweet. So there's going to be more RepX shows in the future as well.
Oh yeah, that's definitely planned. Like it's the first show, but
The
you got to
inaugural.
start somewhere.
The inaugural.
Yeah, you got to start somewhere. And a lot of people say, "Why'd you start in Queensland? It's the hardest place in Australia." But if we can do it here, we can do
Yeah,
it
you can
anywhere,
do
really.
anyway. Yeah, yeah, excellent. And look, like I said, 1,700 square meters of lizards, snakes, crocodiles, birds of prey, cool bugs. A lot to manage. You guys must have a pretty amazing team of production people behind in the shadows making all of this possible.
So I'm sort of the lead of the production side, and John is the finance and the key contact side. But the other production members, while they may not necessarily be directly related as team members in RepX, that is all comes down to our supporting partners, of which you guys are one of them. Because we've talked to make a thing that every show we do, you could travel around with us. And basically, it's the show's podcast that exists on the day.
And we would
Right?
love to if
Yeah.
we get the chance. But look,
So-
I mean, so many other fantastic sponsors like iHerp Magazine who are...
Well, iHerp and Veritas
RepX
Reptile are basically the people presenting it, but we only are basically showing that as a means for people to have something to relate to.
Yeah, right.
But we're not going out there to say that this show is a perfect space for me to showcase my business. I really don't care that it's it could just be in the corner and it's just there. To me it's just an element.
Yeah.
It's not the reason.
Yeah.
So, and that's the same thing with iHerb. So we show that it's there just to let people know that we're involved in some way, but not to make out that it's all about this.
Well, no, I mean, yeah, of course not. But I mean, so many other cool partners getting involved. UQ Herp Society are going to be there.
Reptile Rehab Queensland,
Reptile
which we're
Rehab
giving.
Queensland.
I think we're giving $2,000 to,
Fantastic.
and then I think we've made the agreement that every $10,000 that we go above that, $500 of that goes to them as well. So it could be 2,000 plus to like 3,000, 4,000, depends on how good the day goes.
Yeah, right.
Giving them the cash for that.
Yeah, excellent. Helping
with that.
local reptiles, helping local reptile rehabilitation. It's yeah.
But like other key parts of the show is like signage is one big part. I want to make sure it's visually a nice thing to look at.
Yeah.
So I bought a car and I'm going to get that wrapped. I'm going to get a proper promo car and just kind of all the way
RepX
up there.
promo car.
Very visual experience kind of thing. That's why we have a national signage supplier. So
Right.
they've given
Take
us
it
a
far
deal
and
kind of
wide,
thing.
pretty much.
And they're going to do a little signage all around Australia for us. So
Wow.
we need that kind of support. That's why they're called supporting partners, basically.
And taking it far and wide. I love
Yep.
it. All right, guys, we should wrap up shortly. Let's get into our new research nice and quickly.
Yep.
Here's a quick set of notes for you guys. All right, new research. This one's not exactly as new as we normally do, but we have to do it because it's so appropriate. Green and Johnson from 2014 in the Journal of Thermal Biology. Coloration affects heating and cooling in 3 colour morphs of the Australian blue-tongued lizard. Ha! It's like the perfect paper, right? Ideal. So look, background. Let's talk color-mediated thermoregulation as a hypothesis. The color-mediated thermoregulation hypothesis is basically says if you have a darker body color, you're going to have low reflectance and greater absorption. So you're more efficient at heat gain than pale-colored animals, which are more reflective, and you're also going to radiate that heat out a lot faster. Now this is intuitive and pretty widely assumed to be true, but hasn't really been checked for empirical support too much. A lot of the measures of coloration are kind of qualitative and not very statistically large samples. Some very cool studies, but few cooling studies, and inconsistent use of models versus painting of color morphs, colors on animals versus using actual color morphs. Various different ways to measure temperature instead of keeping it all standard. I guess blue tongues are a fairly ideal model with to measure reflectance under heating and cooling, because you've got one species with that sort of fairly extreme coloration. Now that you've got hypermelanistics, white skinks, and then your wild types, without much other physiological change. So pretty interesting. They took 8 albinos, 10 wild types, 11 hypermelanistics. It'd be interesting to do some of these studies with the larvas. From a size range of 28 to about 600 grams. The dorsal reflectance was measured along each colour along 5 points. So five colour points at each of these. All the colours at each of these 5 locations. 1 on the head, 3 on the body, and 1 on the tail, using an Ocean Optics USB 4000 photo spec and a large tungsten halogen for light. Measuring the wavelength for greatest solar activity between 400 and 900 nanometers at 1 nanometer intervals with a black and white standard. So they calculated from there the percentage body cover by each coloration from dorsal photos in image J, and the overall reflectance for each individual was characterized, so you've got your reflectance per color, and then that color per body coverage gives you reflectance. They also moved on to do the heating, basically placing 3 120 watt floodlights 45 centimeters above them, and cooling was done in a sealed 15 liter polystyrene tub full of ice. So basically they had a few thermocouples attached, about 15 to 30 millimeters into the cloaca, and then secured to the tail, lizard secured to a polystyrene board. Ambient temperature taken with a thermocouple about 3 centimeters to the side on the board as well. Now they're restrained to the board, I think, using a netting which was just pinned to them, so they're not like roped down or anything. From there they were cooled first to about 17 degrees and then put underneath the heat lamps, taking temperature recordings from 18 degrees C until they reached 33, and then put into cooling and recording all the way until they reach 18 degrees C again. From this they calculated the thermal time constant value for heating and cooling, which is basically the heat transfer rate of an ambient of a body to its temperature to the ambient temperature. A high thermal time constant value indicates a slow rate of temperature change, and a low, of course, indicates fast. Variance in the reflectance was tested by ANOVA, so analysis of variance. Tests for color variation and body mass covariance were tested by ANCOVA, analysis of covariance. Pretty cool. They found some significant differences in reflectance between all morphs. Particularly between the wild types and... so hang on, what do we got here? Reflectance for albinos was 56%, 99.3% for wild types, and 1.6% for melanistics. So, your wild lizards are, much less absorptive than those melanistics. 1.6% reflection. Yeah. That's nothing. They're just sucking up the heat.
Yeah.
Whereas your albinos are reflecting about 56% of the light that's in, about half.
I suppose to put a practical edge on that, and I can do it in a single line, is a black blue tongue will bask for a shorter period of time than an albino.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've observed this as well?
You can see it. If you line up all my outdoor cages outside, you can see that basically on a daily basis.
Yeah, okay.
And furthermore to that, to add some, I suppose, some natural ecology into it. I don't know whether it's quite technical, really. You find darker animals in the south of Australia, and you find lighter animals in the north of Australia. And that, those two things.
And not just species variation, but you've got a darker species down south as well that is restricted to those cooler climates.
That's right. Yeah. So.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. Now, as far as covariance as well, color morph and body mass both significantly influence on heating and cooling rates independently. with the albinos gaining heat slower than the wild types and melanistics, while melanistics lose heat faster than wild types and albinos. These were all significant with p-values below 0.005 despite the large effect on body mass. So of course this supports the predictions that, as you would have had, color-mediated thermoregulation hypothesis. But this is the first evidence unconfounded by mass effects or variable use of paint between studies or qualitative color or reflectance measures. So, it's pretty expected, but they've just kind of nailed that one right on the head.
And done it.
Yeah,
With a true scientific edge.
Exactly.
And
run
just the intellectual rule over it, if you like.
Yeah, exactly.
Done it with all the. Yeah.
Made sure that they were right. Straight from the paper, just quoting here. Heating occurred 2 to 3 times faster than cooling for all morphs. Probably due to temperature-dependent changes in peripheral blood flow influencing conductance. Now, this is for the hypomelanistics, I believe. Heating occurred 2 to 3 times faster than cooling for all morphs. Heating occurred faster than cooling, of course. That's right, because of temperature-dependent changes in peripheral blood flow. So they're going to heat up really, really quickly and then cool down because they're going to trap all that temperature, inside their body by changing the amount of blood going to the surface, and allows them to trap that heat in their body for a bit longer rather than having to heat up again.
Yeah, that's right. It hasn't got to the core. In certain cases, you'd say.
Right, so heat gain in melanistic ectotherms may outweigh any disadvantage of increased heat loss. So despite the melanistics, there may be some potential negative effects, such as radiating the heat out faster. They kind of negate that with some of the changes in peripheral blood flow. Pretty interesting. And obviously, something for people to think about if they're buying melanistics.
Yeah, it's certainly something that ultimately, at the end of the day, a reptile will thermoregulate. And
if you give it a good gradient or its exposure.
And to put a practical edge on that, it just shows the importance of giving that gradient within a given environment and take into account due consideration whether it's morphs that you're playing with or whether it's different species, if you're trying to look after southern species in a northern environment or northern species in a southern environment. This is where you've got to take the practical.
Well, exactly. Yeah. Well, when we moved up with my southern blotched blue tongues, quite dark. They've got a little bit of kind of pale brown speckling, but other than that, they're almost jet black.
That's right.
The ones that we had anyway, and bring them up here.
They're
to Queensland.
basically melanistic for the point of what we're discussing.
Yeah. So we basically had to completely change our heating and lighting, particularly in summer. All right, on to the next one. We'll just smash through this one as quickly as possible. This is Ewers et al., an actual new paper from 2017 last year. Endocrine differences among colour morphs in a lizard with alternative behavioural strategies. This is from the Journal of Hormones and Behaviour, issue 93. The Tawny Dragon, Tenophorus decrezii, a small sexually dimorphic agamid lizard which lives on the rocky outcrops of Kangaroo Island, Mount Lofty and Southern Flinders Ranges in South Australia. The females have a uniform cream throat with variable yellow striking and throat coloration in males. Now there's variation within and between populations of this coloration. For example, Flinders males have 4 distinct colour morphs: orange, yellow, grey and orange-yellow. Now in many colour-morphic species, steroid hormone actions, the actions of androgens and glucocorticoids, mediate behavioural changes. And further activational roles of androgen happen during reproduction. So, for example, you've got your dominant morph males with higher testosterone than the less dominant morphs, and also higher aggression. For example, this was seen in the Dalmatian wall lizards, where they were using bite force as a test of aggression. Now, also we might expect the initial versus stress-induced corticosteroid and androgen responses that might reveal some differences between life history trade-offs for the different morphs between survival and reproductive output, for example. In the paper here, the authors were testing whether previously established behavioural differences in C. decrezii match predicted differences in initial and stress-induced levels of androgen and corticosterone concentrations, and aggressive performance, which again they did with bite force. Pretty cool little paper. They've gone down to Yulumbia Urambula Caves Historic Reserve in South Australia, where the population of C. decrezii has those 4 morphs of the males anyway, the orange high aggression, the grey low aggression, and the yellow and orange-yellow moderate aggression morphs. They took blood samples from 25 lizards in 2011, 42 in 2012, and these were spun, and the plasma, centrifuged of course, and the plasma taken off and stored at -20. They used ELISA immunoassays to measure plasma corticosterone and testosterone concentrations absorbed in red on the plate at 415 nanometer on a Fluorostar Optima plate reader. So it's basically laser fluorescence of the little sample there. Calculated corticosterone stress magnitude was done 30 minutes after capture, and compared to initial cortico concentrations immediately on capture. They had 142 caught over 3 years, and data on 70 corticosterone and 56 androgen concentrations, 51 bite force tests, and also additional factors such as time of day, snout net length, time and body temperature at capture. And they used general linear mixed models to test for the differences between color morphs in androgen corticosterone concentration and corticosterone stress magnitude. We're going to call that CSM. And used a general linear model to test for correlations in morph bite force tests. Interesting stuff. The morphs do appear to differ in their not only their baseline but also their post-capture stress androgen, particularly the orange morph, which is more aggressive and has more androgen than the grey or yellow morphs, or the any of the other morphs really. Post-capture, the grey and yellow morphs increase their androgen, whereas there's no increase in the orange or orange-yellow morphs. They're just high, super androgen, angry all the time, particularly during the breeding season. No difference in corticosterone level or CSM. No, and this is after corrected for temperature and size. No difference in size and temperature corrected bite force between morphs. However, the orange yellow morph did tend to have a higher body temperature at capture, and therefore perhaps that's where its increased bite force comes from, which might reflect some anti-predatory behavior differences. For example, the orange had the smallest flight distance. It was less scared as well. Spending more time exposed might lead to that higher body temperature at capture, which might itself lead to that greater bite force. Water temperatures affect both bite force and flight distance. Could go the other way around. It might just be that those morphs pick up temperature better and end up having a lower flight distance and a greater bite force. Just reading straight from the paper here, despite differences in endocrinology between morphs in C. decrezii, the extent to which orange-yellow individuals employ a distinct strategy remains unclear. Furthermore, the role of other neuroendocrine and endocrine mechanisms such as receptor abundance, binding globulin capacity, and steroidogenic enzymes and peptide hormones can also account for differences in behavior and morphology between morphs, should be considered. So pretty interesting how much behavioural difference there is in straight up just morph coloration leading to this is kind of what we're talking about with polygenic and pleiotropy. It's not just colour that's being affected with some of these traits. It's the colour might be linked to hormone concentrations, androgen concentrations, and things like that. Have you seen much behavioural differences between the morphs, other than thermoregulatory stuff like we talked about in the last paper there?
There is behavioural differences between morphs for sure. I've never really looked at it like you've just described.
Is there a more aggressive one?
Absolutely. Albinos defend themselves in a different way. They lack vision. I mean, that's obviously a reason, but it's still down to colour.
Right. Yeah.
Because that colour has affected the vision.
Which affects the behaviour.
So that's the one that jumps out at you straight off the bat.
Right.
It's using different senses to go about its daily business. But I also find that the pure white northerns can be quite aggressive too, and they're much more aggressive than their heterozygous siblings.
Right.
So you'll get different behavioural patterns within the litters, and
so you expect your wild type to be somewhere there in the middle, and some of the other morphs might be more aggressive or less aggressive depending on what is hitchhiking along.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Fascinating.
To say that I totally understand that, I'd be going further than I could take it, but I certainly do notice differences in different colour morphs.
That's fantastic.
In regard to sort of back some of that up, if you like.
Yeah. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, look, I think we're going to have to wrap it up there. I wish we could sit here and talk more about these, spend a bit more time on these new research topics, but we've already been chatting here for ages. We're running out of time. So, guys, just before we head off, big thanks, of course, to RepX, and guys, go check them out at repx.com.au. That's 1,700 square meters of amazing reptiles, invertebrates, birds of prey, so much more. repx.com.au. Guys, thanks so much for coming along and joining us. And Blue Tongue Lizards on Facebook, bluetonguelizard.com.au.
Yeah, the name I use is consistent across the lot. It's bluetonguelizard.com.au, so that even the Facebook page is called that. Yes, if you punch that into the internet, you're going to find the web page, but it is called .com.au on both Facebook and Instagram too, which is, I suppose, my preferred destination now with the way social media has gone.
Yeah.
We're all looking for the easily consumable.
Make it a little bit faster.
Yeah, that's right. That's where everybody sits,
a bit
right?
less painful.
Everybody's already there.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's use it.
Yeah.
And that's where I've, if you like, deferred all my
well, look, I mean,
updated info too.
Instagram's a great place to see some of these beautiful morphs. I mean, you've got all your amazing pictures of your lavas and your snows and your albinos and your hypomelanistics and fantastic stuff, really. So that's bluetonguelizard.com.au on Instagram or Facebook.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Excellent.
Thanks.
Well, thanks so much for coming, guys. And I think that's about it, guys. Plenty more wildlife cake and cocktails coming up in the future. And don't forget, Brisbane Reptile Expo. That's the RepX Brisbane Reptile Expo on the 25th of March at the Royal International Convention Centre, Brisbane Showground. Come and check us out. We'll all be there. And plenty more wildlife cake and cocktails coming up in the future. Cheers, guys. Talk soon. Bye.